So I want you, the listener, to just take a second and think about the last time you took a careless sip of water and it just went right down the wrong pipe.
Oh, yeah, that is the worst feeling.
Right. It's just this instantaneous, suffocating panic. You spend like the next 5 minutes coughing your lungs out, your eyes are watering, you literally can't speak.
And you're genuinely wondering for a split second if a literal glass of tap water is going to take you out.
Exactly. And I mean, we tend to walk around feeling like these highly engineered, perfected biological machines, sitting at the absolute apex of the natural world.
Right at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, but that choking reflex alone is this massive glaring clue that we are really not. And that's exactly what we're getting into today, because by the end of this conversation, looking in the mirror is going to be a completely different experience for you.
It really is.
You're not going to see this finished, flawless masterpiece. You're going to see a walking, breathing museum of ancient accidents, bizarre compromises, and just scavenged spare parts.
It's a fundamentally destabilizing shift in perspective, honestly. Viewing the human body not as this intentional endpoint, but as a living historical document reveals a profoundly messy narrative.
Messy is definitely the word for it.
Because the illusion of a grand design just falls apart very quickly when you actually pop the hood and look at the plumbing.
I mean, that is just the perfect way to frame our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are unpacking some truly mind-bending insights from the anatomist and author Alice Roberts, specifically from her recent interviews in New Scientist.
Really fascinating stuff in there.
Oh, absolutely. And our main goal here is to just completely dismantle this comforting idea of human exceptionalism.
Yeah.
That ingrained cultural belief that we are somehow elevated above the rest of the natural world.
Like we're floating in our own special VIP category.
Exactly. We are going to look at how our deepest history is literally written into our bones, why our bodies are just riddled with inexplicable design flaws, how a literal virus made human birth possible, which is crazy to think about.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, it's wild. And finally, why friendliness, rather than just raw, brutal intelligence, might actually be the real reason we are the last human species standing.
Well, to really challenge that narrative, you have to look at where the illusion of our uniqueness actually starts. And for a lot of medical professionals, that illusion is built right there in the dissection room.
Right, because medical training is so historically siloed.
Exactly. You study humans as humans, completely isolated from the rest of the animal kingdom. But Roberts actually experienced this literal collision of worlds that changed her whole view.
Yeah, her department relocated, right.
Yeah, she was moving labs, and suddenly the human anatomy lab was just stuck in the basement, directly beneath the veterinary school's dissection room.
I found that specific detail so striking in the source material. Like, she gets roped into teaching some veterinary anatomy on the fly, starts looking at a dog's abdomen, and just realizes she can immediately identify the entire layout.
Right, she's looking at the liver, the stomach, the intestines.
And it's literally the same basic architectural blueprint. But the real breakthrough, the moment she describes the rigid walls between humans and animals just completely dissolving, happened on the dissection table with a fetal lamb.
A fetal lamb's heart, specifically. And to really understand why this hit her so hard, you kind of have to look at how fetal circulation actually works.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, when a human fetus is in the womb, it obviously isn't breathing air. Its lungs are essentially deflated and just filled with fluid.
Right, it's getting everything from the mom.
Exactly. It receives all its oxygenated blood directly from the mother via the umbilical cord. So because of that, sending its own blood to its own lungs to pick up oxygen would be completely pointless.
A total waste of energy.
Yeah. So the developing human heart has this biological workaround built in. It's called the foramen ovale.
Which is basically a literal hole, right?
A literal hole. It sits between the upper chambers of the heart, and it allows the blood to just bypass the pulmonary circuit entirely. Skip the lungs, go straight to the body.
It's just a temporary shunt to skip the non-functional lungs. And she had studied this intricate human mechanism for years and years.
Right, but then she's looking at this fetal lamb's heart on the vet table, and she sees the exact same hole.
The identical anatomical mechanism.
Identical. It was this visceral realization for her that the human heart just isn't special. It is simply a mammalian heart.
And that biological continuity extends so much further back than mammals, doesn't it?
Oh, way further. If you trace the evolutionary lineage of that exact heart, you are looking at hardware that originated in ancient fish.
Wait, ancient fish?
Yeah, our complex four-chambered heart actually evolved from a much simpler two-chambered pump over literally hundreds of millions of years.
Hmm.
Once you know what you're looking for, the deep history is just inescapable.
I mean, for me, the limb structures are what really drove that home. You look at human hands and arms, and they feel so specialized for what we do, like typing on a keyboard, throwing a baseball, playing a guitar.
They feel uniquely human.
They really do. But if you trace the developmental pathways and the bone structures back through the fossil record, you hit this point roughly 360 million years ago with creatures like Tiktaalik.
Right, the early tetrapods.
Yeah, these bizarre lobe-finned fish pulling themselves into the mud in the shallows. And the blueprint for our arms and legs is literally just ancient fins that mutated over eons into weight-bearing structures.
It's just variations on a theme.
Right. It's one bone in the upper arm, two bones in the forearm, a cluster of bones in the wrist, and then the digits.
And that exact underlying pattern, one bone, two bones, many blobs, digits.
Many blobs. I love that.
Oh, that's what they are in the wrist.
Yeah.
But that pattern is present in a bat swing, a whale's flipper, a horse's leg, and your arm.
Wow.
We are all just basically running slight variations of the same ancient software, and you can even see it up in the human head and neck.
Okay, how so?
Well, the really complex structures of our jaw, the tiny bones in our inner ear that allow us to hear, and the nerves running all through our throat, those are directly derived from things called pharyngeal arches.
Pharyngeal arches.
Yeah. And in an embryonic fish, those exact same arches develop into gills.
Wait, gills.
Gills. But in a human embryo, those same structures just sort of fold, migrate, and twist around to form our lower face and neck.
So we are literally walking around with fish gills repurposed as jawbones and ear bones.
Yep, you're listening to me right now with modified fish gills.
That is insane. It really makes you realize that our genetic code is basically like a 500-year-old house that's been constantly renovated by 50 different owners.
That's a great analogy.
Like, you put up nice new drywall, you install some smart lighting, but if you tear into the walls, the plumbing is still completely from the Victorian era.
Oh, the plumbing is way older than Victorian. The source actually goes even further back than ancient fish, pointing to these things called Hox genes.
Hox genes, right.
Yes, the Hox genes are just the perfect example of that ancient plumbing. When an embryo is just a tiny little cluster of cells, it needs a set of instructions to tell it the basic body plan.
Like top and bottom.
Exactly. Where the head goes, where the tail goes, which side is the front, which is the back, and the genes that lay down that chemical gradient in humans are virtually identical to the genes found in organisms that lived 800 million years ago.
800 million.
Yeah. We share that fundamental biological blueprint with modern insects and worms. The literal code that tells a human embryo how to orient its body is the exact same code organizing a fruit fly on your kitchen counter.
I mean, that just fundamentally breaks the entire concept of human exceptionalism right there. But even knowing all that, it's still hard for me to shake the feeling that we are at least somewhat removed from, like, the apes.
Sure, we like to think so.
Right, because we wear clothes, we build massive cities, we literally go to space. But the chimpanzee exam question from the article just completely shatters that physical distance.
Oh, the exam question is brilliant. It is this amazing thought experiment for medical students.
So how does it work?
Well, if an anatomist took a humerus, the long bone of the upper arm, from a female chimpanzee and just casually placed it into a practical anatomy exam right alongside human bones,
Okay.
the vast majority of highly trained medical students would completely fail to identify it as non-human.
That is staggering. I mean, these are medical students trained to memorize every tiny ridge and groove of human anatomy, and they wouldn't even notice they were holding an ape bone.
They really wouldn't. The differences are just incredibly minute. The bone is practically identical in overall size and shape. All the landmarks where the muscles attach are virtually the same.
So how would you even tell them apart?
To spot the imposter, you would have to look incredibly closely at the distal end, the elbow joint.
Down at the elbow. Okay.
Right, there are two specific articulating surfaces down there. The capitulum, which connects to the radius bone on the forearm, and the trochlea, which connects to the ulna. Because chimpanzees engage in a lot of knuckle walking and spend a lot more time suspending their entire body weight from branches, those specific joint surfaces are shaped just slightly differently to accommodate those mechanical stresses.
So just tiny, tiny mechanical tweaks.
Exactly. Unless you are a specialized comparative anatomist actively looking for the mechanics of knuckle walking, it just looks exactly like a human arm bone.
It really makes our constant insistence on this massive, stark divide between human and animal seem kind of absurd.
Totally absurd.
I mean, we've built this environment, climate-controlled rooms, artificial lights, microphones, that creates this profound psychological illusion of separation. But biologically, there is no hard line at all. It's just an unbroken thread of evolutionary modifications.
And if you want the ultimate proof that we aren't some perfected endpoint, all you have to do is look at the flaws in those modifications.
The glitches in the system.
Yeah, the glitches. Because if we were actually designed by a master engineer, that engineer should honestly have their credentials revoked immediately.
I love that.
The final product is just full of bizarre, hacked together inefficiencies.
Well, this gets right to the myth of the master plan, right? Because we so often anthropomorphize evolution. We talk about it as if it has agency or foresight.
Like it has a goal.
Right. As if evolution looked at a primitive ape and said, hey, in a few million years, it would be really great if this thing could play the piano, so let's start working on those hand tendons right now.
That is such a common misconception. But evolution is entirely blind. It operates almost exclusively through negative selection.
Meaning it just weeds things out.
Exactly. It weeds out what severely impairs survival or reproduction.
Yeah.
It cannot draft a blueprint, it cannot anticipate future needs, and crucially, it absolutely cannot scrap a flawed design and start over from scratch.
It can only work with what it already has.
Right. It can only modify the existing hardware. If a random genetic mutation provides a slight advantage, or, honestly, even if it just doesn't kill the organism outright, it gets passed on, the result is basically biological duct tape.
Biological duct tape. Okay, so the human eye.
Oh, the eye.
It always gets held up as this ultimate marvel of complex engineering, right? But the wiring is famously disastrous.
It is incredibly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because in any logical design for a camera or light sensor, you would obviously place the light-sensitive elements at the very front to catch the light.
Righteously.
And then you'd run all the wiring out the back to a processor so it's out of the way.
Makes total sense.
But in the human eye, the light-sensitive cells, photoreceptors, are rods and cones. They sit at the very back of the retina. The nerves that carry the signal to the brain, the ganglion cells, actually sit in front of them.
Wait, so the light actually has to pass through a layer of cellular wiring before it even hits the sensors?
Yes. The wires are literally blocking the incoming light. And it gets worse, because all those wires on the inside of the eye eventually have to bundle together and exit the eyeball to reach the brain.
Right, they have to get out somehow.
And they do this by punching a literal hole straight through the retina, creating the optic disc.
And that's our blind spot.
Exactly. That hole creates a literal blind spot in our field of vision where we have zero light receptors.
I mean, that is just terrible design, especially since, from what I read, cephalopods, like octopuses, actually got it right.
Yeah, octopus eyes are so much better.
Their eyes evolved completely independently from ours, and their wiring runs out the back of the retina like it's supposed to. No blind spot at all.
They got the good blueprint.
They really did. Meanwhile, evolution couldn't fix our backward wiring, so it just patched the software in our visual cortex to constantly Photoshop our blind spots out of our conscious awareness.
It literally is a software patch for our hardware failure.
Hmm.
And an even more glaring example of bad hardware, which is just wild to think about, is the recurrent laryngeal nerve.
Okay, tell me about this nerve.
So this nerve connects your brain to your larynx, your voice box. It transmits all the signals that allow you to speak and swallow. It branches off the vagus nerve in your neck.
Okay.
Now, the larynx is right there in your throat. A sensible design would be a straight shot from the brain to the throat, maybe a few inches long at most.
But because we evolved from ancient fish, it takes a massive detour.
Right. Completely unnecessary one. In our fish ancestors, the equivalent nerve went from the brain, right past the heart, directly to the gills. It was a very short, very straight path.
Sure, because the heart and gills are right next to each other in a fish.
Exactly. But over millions of years, as fish evolved into tetrapods and eventually into mammals, the whole body plan changed. The neck elongated to separate the head from the shoulders, and the heart descended deep down into the chest cavity.
And the nerve just got trapped.
It was hooked under the arch of the aorta, a major blood vessel right down near the heart. And because evolution can't just snip a nerve, reroute it, and reattach it like an electrician, the nerve simply had to stretch.
It just got dragged down.
Yes. As the heart moved down into the chest and the neck moved up over eons, it dragged the nerve with it. So today, your recurrent laryngeal nerve travels down your neck, deep into your chest cavity, loops underneath your aorta, and travels all the way back up your neck to finally reach the larynx.
It's literally like running an extension cord from your bedroom, out the front door, down the street, around a neighbor's house, and back through your bedroom window just to plug in a desk lamp.
That is exactly what it is.
And it's not just us. I read that in a giraffe, that exact same nerve has to travel all the way down that massive neck into the chest and all the way back up. It's like an extra 15 feet of completely unnecessary wiring just because a fish millions of years ago happened to have its heart close to its gills.
It is the ultimate example of historical constraint. The body is just constantly forced to work around its own ancestral baggage.
Which honestly brings us right back to that choking reflex we started the show with, the shared tube for food and air.
Oh yeah, the pharynx,
Right, we have the esophagus leading to the stomach and the trachea leading down to the lungs, and they both open up in the exact same space in the back of the throat.
which is a terrible idea.
It's why toddlers choke on grapes. Why wouldn't evolution just give us a dedicated breathing hole, completely separate from our eating hole?
I mean, it seems like the most obvious safety upgrade imaginable, right? It would prevent countless accidental deaths every single year. But Roberts actually discussed this exact hypothetical with an ear, nose, and throat specialist.
And what did they say?
Well, the ENT pointed out a biological reality of our respiratory system that makes a separate breathing hole an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I was reading about this mucociliary escalator mechanism in the source, and it is genuinely upsetting to think about.
It is deeply unglamorous, but vital. Basically, your lungs are this warm, moist environment constantly exposed to the outside air.
So they're a magnet for bacteria.
Exactly. To prevent horrific infections from every single speck of dust, pollen, or bacteria you inhale, your airways are lined with these goblet cells that produce a thick layer of mucus.
Okay.
And underneath that mucus are cilia, which are these microscopic hair-like structures. These cilia are constantly beating in a coordinated upward wave, acting like a microscopic escalator, continuously sweeping that contaminated, dirty mucus up and out of your lungs.
And we produce a staggering amount of it, right? Something like half a liter of this lung mucus every single day.
Half a liter.
So because our windpipe opens into our throat, that escalator just dumps the mucus right into the pharynx, and we subconsciously swallow it.
Right. The acid in our stomach just destroys the bacteria, and we go about our day and never even notice.
Okay, but now picture the biological alternative.
Right. If you had a dedicated breathing hole, perhaps on your neck or upper chest, completely sealed off from your digestive tract, where does that escalator go?
It goes out.
It goes out. You would just be constantly draining half a liter of dirty, thick lung fluid out of a hole in your neck all day, every single day.
I mean, that would fundamentally alter human society and hygiene as we know it. We are literally stuck with the choking hazard because the alternative is a constant external drainage of respiratory waste.
Swallowing our own lung cleaning fluid was just the biological compromise that allowed us to have a closed system.
Well, that is a compromise I'm suddenly very, very grateful for. But looking at all these messy fixes, there is one detail about human reproduction that really feels like the ultimate biological hack, and that's the yolk sac.
The yolk sac is fascinating.
Because we are placental mammals, we do not lay eggs. So why on earth does a human embryo still grow a yolk sac?
Well, if you look at a developing chick inside an egg, the yolk sac is massive, right? It contains all the fats and nutrients the embryo needs to literally build a body.
Right.
But human embryos derive their nutrition entirely from the mother's bloodstream via the placenta. The human yolk sac just sort of floats there, completely empty of yolk.
It seems like the absolute perfect candidate for negative selection to weed out. Like, why waste precious cellular energy growing an empty balloon?
Because it turns out it's not an empty warehouse. Evolution just moved a different business in.
I love that.
Evolution is incredibly opportunistic. Rather than developing a completely new anatomical structure for early cellular development, it just co-opted the membrane of the useless yolk sac.
So what does it do now?
In human embryos, that ancient reptilian egg sac is the site of hematopoiesis.
Meaning blood creation.
Right. It is where our very first blood cells form, long before the baby's liver or bone marrow can develop enough to take over. And even more importantly than that, the primordial germ cells.
Wait, germ cells like sperm and eggs?
Yes. The precursor cells that will eventually migrate into the embryo and become sperm or eggs actually originate in the wall of the yolk sac.
Think about the implications of that for a second. The continuation of the human species, our ability to reproduce at all, relies entirely on our bodies using an abandoned evolutionary relic, an empty egg sac, as a temporary nursery for our reproductive cells.
Yeah. If evolution had successfully deleted that useless sac a million years ago, we would be completely infertile.
We survived because of biological hoarding. We just kept the junk in the attic, and eventually it became essential.
Exactly.
Which perfectly sets up what I think is the most mind-bending fact in this entire discussion, the placenta itself.
Oh, this is the best part.
Because the human placenta isn't entirely human. The story of the gene syncytin is just incredible.
It fundamentally challenges our whole concept of what human DNA even is.
Uh-huh.
So during the development of the placenta, there is this critical outer layer called the syncytiotrophoblast.
Okay, the syncytiotrophoblast.
Yes, this layer interfaces directly with the mother's uterus, and to function properly, the individual cells of this layer have to do something really weird. They have to break down their individual cell walls and completely fuse together.
So they create one massive, continuous, multinucleated sheet of tissue.
Right.
And that fusion is vital because it stops the mother's immune system from recognizing the fetus as a foreign parasite and just attacking it, right?
Exactly. It creates a seamless barrier. It regulates nutrient exchange and physically hides the fetus from the immune system. Now, the gene responsible for producing the protein that causes these cells to fuse is called syncytin.
But when geneticists analyzed syncytin, they realized it didn't look like a normal mammalian gene at all.
Not at all. It looked exactly like the envelope gene of a retrovirus.
Because it is a virus.
It is literal, actual viral DNA. You have to remember, a retrovirus operates differently than a standard virus. It doesn't just invade a cell and force it to make copies until it bursts.
Right.
A retrovirus contains an enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which basically translates its RNA into DNA, and then another enzyme called integrase, which literally cuts open the host genome and splices the viral code directly into the host's own DNA.
Okay, so millions and millions of years ago, some ancient rat-like mammalian ancestor of ours got infected by a retrovirus pandemic.
Yes.
And the virus spliced its code into our ancestors' germline cells, meaning the sperm or egg cells. The animal somehow survived the infection, but that viral code was now a permanent part of its DNA, getting passed down to every single generation afterward.
Exactly. And over time, random mutations eventually disabled the harmful parts of the virus. It could no longer replicate and cause disease. It just became what we call an endogenous retrovirus. Right, dead code. But the specific piece of code that the virus originally used to fuse its own membrane with host cells to infect them, that piece remained perfectly intact.
Wow.
So millions of years later, as mammals were evolving and struggling to figure out live birth, natural selection sort of stumbled upon this dormant viral code in the biological attic. It essentially said, hey, this fusion protein would be incredibly useful for securely attaching a developing embryo to a uterus.
So we literally stole the intellectual property of a pathogen. We took a weapon that was used by a virus to infect us, disabled the payload, and repurposed the delivery mechanism to invent the placenta.
Yes. Without a random viral pandemic millions of years ago, placental mammals, which includes humans, just would not exist.
Right.
We owe our birth to an ancient infection.
It completely proved that our genome isn't this pristine golden library of human engineering. It is an archive of survival, just filled with scavenged parts, disabled parasites, and repurposed junk.
A total patchwork.
Okay, so anatomically and genetically, we are a cobbled together mess of fish parts, reptile sacs, and viral code. But surely the one thing that redeems us, the one thing that truly separates us from the rest of the hominin family tree, is our massive, hyper-intelligent brain.
That's the classic assumption, yeah.
Right. I mean, we have these giant supercomputers in our skulls. That has to be why we are the only human species left. We were just smarter than everyone else.
And that has been the dominant narrative for well over a century in anthropology. The traditional trinity of human evolution basically relies on three pillars: bipedalism, smaller teeth indicating a changing diet, and immense rapid brain expansion.
And to be fair, our brains are extraordinary.
Oh, without a doubt. The encephalization quotient, which is the ratio of our brain size to our body mass, is an extreme outlier among primates. Furthermore, the intense folding of our cerebral cortex, all those sulci and gyri, that maximizes the surface area for complex cognitive processing. We have packed an astonishing amount of neural density into our skulls.
And the assumption was always this really clean linear equation. Big brain equals advanced technology.
Exactly.
Like, as hominins grew larger brains, they gained the cognitive capacity to conceptualize and manufacture complex stone tools, which then allowed them to dominate their environment.
It is a deeply satisfying narrative because, well, it flatters our intelligence.
It makes us feel good.
Yeah, but paleoanthropology is rarely that neat and tidy. And the fossil record recently threw a massive, massive wrench into this theory.
Right, coming from a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia?
Yes, the Hobbit, Homo floresiensis.
Tell us about the Hobbit.
So Roberts describes this incredibly visceral shock of seeing the original LB1 skeleton. She was at a museum in Jakarta, and the curators actually brought the bones out and just laid them on a table lined with casual bubble wrap.
Which is wild for such a priceless fossil.
Very casual.
Yeah.
But the post-cranial skeleton, the arms, the legs, the pelvis, and it was undeniably part of the Homo genus. It was unequivocally human anatomy. But the skull completely broke all the established rules.
Because it was absolutely tiny.
Tiny. We are talking about a fully grown adult hominin with a brain volume of roughly 400 to 500 cubic centimeters.
Okay, and to put that in perspective, a modern human brain averages around what, 1,300 to 1,400 cubic centimeters?
Right. So the LB1 skull held a brain about a third of our size. It was closer in volume to a modern chimpanzee's brain.
It was literally roughly the size of a large grapefruit.
Exactly.
But the crucial context here is the archaeology surrounding that tiny skeleton, because these small-brain hominins weren't just barely surviving on this island like apes.
No, they were leaving behind extensive evidence of complex stone tool manufacture.
And that is what completely shatters the paradigm, right?
Because knapping flint is not a simple task. It's not just banging rocks together. It requires immense cognitive foresight. You have to select the right type of stone with the correct crystalline structure to begin with.
Right, you can't just use limestone.
Right. And then you have to choose a hammerstone of the exact right density. You have to strike the core at incredibly precise angles to utilize what's called conchoidal fracture mechanics.
Meaning you have to predict how the force will travel through the stone to detach a specific flake.
Exactly. It requires a mental template of a tool that does not physically exist yet, and the working memory to execute a multi-step sequence of strikes to achieve it.
And Homo floresiensis was doing all of this complex multi-step engineering with a grapefruit-sized brain.
They were.
I mean, this completely destroys the barrier to entry we established for human intelligence. If you don't actually need a 1400cc supercomputer to invent and manufacture technology, why did our specific brains get so ridiculously large and expensive?
Because the metabolic cost of the human brain is staggering.
Yeah, it accounts for about 2% of our body weight, but consumes nearly 20% of our resting energy.
It's a massive energy hog.
Mm.
And evolution does not fund metabolic deficits without a massive payoff. If a 500cc brain can manage complex tool making, our expansion had to be driven by something else entirely.
Like what?
Well, theories range from the social brain hypothesis, the intense computational need to track complex relationships, gossip, and alliances in larger groups.
That makes sense.
Or there's ecological dominance, or even Richard Wrangham's hypothesis that controlling fire and cooking meat essentially pre-digested our food, freeing up the massive caloric budget required to grow the brain in the first place.
But whatever actually drove our brain growth, The Hobbit proves that raw brain size wasn't the exclusive key to cultural behavior or technology,
Not at all.
which honestly opens up a very uncomfortable question about our own survival. Because we know we weren't the only advanced hominins walking the earth at the time.
No. The planet was actually crowded with diverse human lineages for hundreds of thousands of years. There were Neanderthals throughout Europe and Asia, Denisovans, the hobbits on Flores, and likely several others we haven't even found yet.
We were not a solitary pinnacle of evolution. We were just one little branch on a very bushy tree. Yet we are the only ones left sitting here talking into microphones today. And the default assumption, I think heavily influenced by 20th century views on warfare and competition, was that we just outsmarted them.
Right, the survival of the fittest.
Yeah, we assume early Homo sapiens marched into Europe with superior weapons, deadlier technology, and a higher strategic intellect, and just militarily wiped the Neanderthals off the map. Nature red in tooth and claw.
We projected our own modern history of colonization and conquest deep into the Paleolithic. We just assumed a technological supremacy that simply isn't supported by the archaeological record.
And I found the experimental archaeology around this so fascinating because we always look at the beautiful, elongated flint blades made by early Homo sapiens, the Aurignacian tools, right?
Painful tools.
And we compare them to the flatter, broader flakes of the Neanderthal levallois technique, and our bias makes us just assume the sleeker human blade must have been deadlier or better.
Because it looks more modern to our eyes. It looks like a modern knife. But researchers have actually rigorously tested this assumption.
How do you test a stone tool?
They brought in expert modern flint knappers to faithfully recreate both Neanderthal tools and early modern human tools.
Mhm.
And then they tested them objectively for actual functionality.
Like cutting meat and scraping hides.
Cutting meat, scraping hides, hafting them onto wooden spears to test penetration. The results were incredibly clear. Neanderthal technology was highly sophisticated and just as effective as ours.
Oh.
They were master craftsmen, adapted perfectly to their Ice Age environment. We absolutely did not have a decisive technological advantage.
So if our tools weren't better and our brains weren't necessarily the sole reason for complex thought, what was our secret weapon? Why did we survive the massive climatic shifts of the Ice Age while the Neanderthals just faded out?
The answer seems to lie not in the tools themselves, but in the landscape where the tools are found. It really comes down to human geography.
Geography, okay.
When archaeologists analyze Neanderthal habitation sites, they look closely at the lithic scatter, which is the debris left over from stone toolmaking. Almost universally, the raw materials used by Neanderthals were sourced very locally.
Meaning they found the rocks nearby.
Right. They utilized the flint or chert found within a very narrow radius of their camp, maybe 20 or 30 kilometers at most.
So they were deeply, deeply embedded in their local environment.
Highly localized. But when you look at early modern human sites from the exact same time period, you see a completely different pattern. You find tools made from exotic raw materials.
Like specific types of obsidian.
Yes, specific obsidian or high-quality flint that objectively originates hundreds of kilometers away from the site where it was found.
Well, stones don't migrate on their own. If exotic flint is moving 300 kilometers across the landscape, it means people are moving.
People are moving, and more importantly, people are interacting. It implies extensive, complex trade networks. It implies language, exchange, and social bonds extending far, far beyond the immediate family unit.
It points to survival of the friendliest, not necessarily the fittest.
Exactly.
Let's play out a hypothetical scenario to understand why that actually matters for survival. Imagine a harsh climatic downturn during the Ice Age. A localized drought or a shift in animal migration patterns causes a severe food shortage in one specific valley.
Okay, if a Neanderthal group is living in that valley, their localized focus suddenly becomes a fatal vulnerability. They know their immediate territory intimately, but they lack established connections with any groups outside of it.
Right.
So if the local resources collapse, the group just faces starvation. They are isolated, and isolated populations in nature are highly vulnerable to extinction events.
But if an early modern human group faces that exact same localized famine in their valley,
They have options. Because of those expansive trade networks we talked about, they have established relationships, perhaps even kin connections, with groups in the next valley over or on the other side of a mountain range.
they can leverage those social networks to migrate, share resources, or even merge groups temporarily to survive the winter.
It acts as a massive, decentralized insurance policy against localized disasters. Instead of picturing early humans surviving because we were ruthless, solitary conquerors, the evidence heavily suggests we survived because we were the hominins most willing to share information, trade resources, and actually rely on strangers.
Cooperation was our actual apex adaptation.
Exactly. And we see the devastating cost of isolation clearly written in the genetic record, too. When geneticists sequence Neanderthal DNA, they find evidence of severe population bottlenecks and extremely high levels of inbreeding.
Because they couldn't mix with other groups.
Right. During periods of harsh glaciation, their populations fragmented into isolated pockets, which deeply reduced their genetic diversity and resilience.
And it wasn't just Neanderthals, right? Isolation seems to be a universal death sentence for any hominin. The source mentioned a specific human culture, the Chattel Peronium.
Yes, often referred to as the LRJ culture. It was a transitional industry in Europe. And while the exact creators of this culture are still debated, when human populations adopted similarly isolated, localized survival strategies, they met the exact same fate as the Neanderthals.
They just vanished from the archaeological record.
Small, disconnected populations simply cannot survive the long-term mathematical odds of severe environmental fluctuations. Connection is the absolute prerequisite for endurance.
I mean, that entirely flips the script on how we view biology. We are so conditioned by popular science to view evolution solely through the lens of cutthroat competition.
It is a profound bias in our culture. The interview actually explicitly contrasts this competitive obsession with the work of evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis.
Oh, she pioneered the theory of endosymbiosis, right?
Precisely. This is the idea of how complex cells formed in the first place. Billions of years ago, all life consisted of simple, single-celled prokaryotes, like bacteria.
Right, very simple life.
The massive leap to complex eukaryotic cells, the cells that actually make up animals, plants, and humans, that didn't happen through one cell, aggressively outcompeting and destroying all the others.
It happened through cooperation.
Right. A large host cell essentially engulfed a smaller, energy-producing bacterium. But instead of digesting it, they formed a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. That engulfed bacterium eventually evolved into the mitochondria.
The power plant of our cells.
Exactly. The very foundation of complex life is built on entities merging and cooperating, not just killing each other.
It's such a powerful metaphor for human survival. And if you contrast our sociability with our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees, the behavioral gap is just terrifying.
Chimpanzee behavior can be brutal.
Right. Chimpanzees live in complex social groups, but their interactions between different groups can be incredibly violent.
Hmm.
Jane Goodall famously observed the Gombe Chimpanzee War, where one group literally systematically hunted down and brutally killed every single member of a neighboring group just to take their territory.
Is organized warfare.
Yeah. And while humans are obviously capable of horrific violence, our baseline capacity for expansive intergroup cooperation and our tolerance of strangers is just completely unique in the primate world.
Our social networks kept us alive. But the implications of our culture actually go much deeper than mere survival. Our behaviors, our cultural innovations didn't just allow us to weather the Ice Age. They actually began to physically reshape our anatomy.
Okay, this brings us to the fascinating reciprocal relationship between culture and biology. Because we usually think of evolution strictly as biology changing first, right?
Right. Mutation leads to behavior.
Yeah, like a random genetic mutation happens, giving an animal longer legs, and because of those longer legs, it can now run faster and hunt differently. Biology dictates behavior. But you're saying behavior can dictate biology.
It is a concept often related to niche construction, or the Baldwin effect. If an animal changes its behavior, like it adopts a new diet, moves to a new environment, or invents a new skill, that behavioral shift creates a brand new set of selective pressures on the population.
So the behavior comes first.
Yes. The source notes that in modern bird populations, for instance, species that exhibit high behavioral flexibility, birds that are inquisitive, learn quickly, and adapt their foraging strategies, they actually show much faster rates of biological evolution.
Wow.
Their cultural adaptability actually accelerates their physical adaptation.
Okay, let's apply that directly to human evolution. Give me a concrete example of a human behavior physically changing our bodies over time.
Let's look at the biomechanics of running, and specifically through the lens of a very famous fossil, the 1.5 million-year-old skeleton of Homo ergaster, commonly known as Nariokotomi boy or Turkana boy.
Right. Up until this point in the fossil record, hominins like Australopithecus were bipedal, but they were still somewhat transitional.
Very transitional.
They had shorter legs, longer arms, and shoulders that were clearly adapted for spending a significant amount of time still climbing in trees.
Exactly. They were efficient walkers, but they were absolutely not built for sustained speed. But with Nariokotomi boy, a completely new body plan strides onto the scene.
What's different about him?
He has long, linear legs, much shorter arms, and a barrel-shaped rib cage. He has a whole suite of anatomical features that are completely unnecessary for simple walking, but are absolutely critical for endurance running.
Why do we even need different anatomy for running? I mean, from the outside, running just looks like walking, but faster.
Mechanically, they're entirely different modes of locomotion.
Really?
Yeah. Walking is essentially a controlled pendulum motion. You keep a relatively steady center of mass, and your body just vaults over stiff legs in an inverted pendulum dynamic. It is highly, highly energy efficient.
Okay, so what is running?
Running is a series of explosive leaps. You are entirely airborne during a portion of every single stride. It is fundamentally an exercise in controlled falling.
Controlled falling.
You pitch your body weight forward, gravity tries to pull you down, and you have to throw a foot out to catch yourself, absorb massive impact forces, and immediately launch yourself forward again. To survive that repeated, violent impact without destroying your joints and bones, the body needs a highly specialized shock absorption and stabilization system.
And what are the specific biological shock absorbers that Nariokotomi boy evolved to have?
The most prominent one is the Achilles tendon. If you look at the anatomy of a chimpanzee or even earlier hominins, they lack a substantial Achilles tendon.
Because they don't need it.
Right, they don't need one for climbing or slow walking. But modern humans have a massive, thick Achilles tendon connecting the calf muscles to the heel bone.
So what does it do during a run?
During running, when your foot strikes the ground, that tendon stretches, storing kinetic energy like a giant biological rubber band. As your foot pushes off, it recoils, releasing that stored elastic energy and springing you forward. It dramatically reduces the muscular effort required to run.
It's a literal energy recycling system in our ankles. What else?
The gluteus maximus, your rear end.
Okay.
It is the single largest and heaviest muscle in the human body. When you were just walking on a flat surface, the gluteus maximus is surprisingly inactive. It really doesn't do much work at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, you barely use it to walk. But the exact moment you break into a run, that massive muscle fires intensely. It acts as the primary engine to forcefully extend the hip and propel the body forward while simultaneously stabilizing the trunk so your upper body doesn't pitch wildly out of control.
So we have biological rubber bands in our ankles and a massive engine in our hips. And I remember reading in the source about a specific ligament in the neck that is also crucial for running.
Oh, the nuchal ligament. That one is fascinating. It attaches from the back of the skull down to the cervical vertebrae.
Why do we need it?
Think about the impact forces traveling up your spine every time your foot strikes the ground while running. Without a stabilizing mechanism, your relatively heavy head would constantly violently pitch forward and snap back with every single stride.
Oh, you wouldn't be able to see where you were going.
You'd get a concussion.
Mm.
The nuchal ligament acts like a taut bungee cord, passively stabilizing the head and keeping your eyes focused forward without requiring constant, exhausting muscular effort from your neck muscles.
Okay, so we have this incredibly specialized package of anatomical features perfectly tailored for endurance running. But how does this prove that culture drives biology? How did the behavior come first?
Consider the environmental context of the African savanna around 2 million years ago. Imagine an early population of hominins. They aren't great runners yet. They don't have the big Achilles tendon or the massive glutes, but they are intelligent and they are observant.
Okay, setting the scene.
One day, a group notices vultures circling in the distance. They realize that a predator, perhaps a saber-toothed cat, has made a kill.
And they realize there is a window of opportunity.
Exactly. The predator eats its fill and leaves to sleep in the shade. But within a very short time, massive packs of hyenas, which are formidable scavengers who can crush bone, they will arrive to devour the rest of the carcass.
So there's a ticking clock.
A very fast ticking clock. The hominins realize that if they can cover the distance quickly enough, they can sprint to the carcass, quickly hack off meat or marrow-rich bones with their stone tools, and retreat to safety before the hyenas arrive.
Power scavenging. But it requires speed and endurance under the hot sun.
And that strategy is a purely behavioral innovation, an idea. But once that group adopts this strategy and teaches it to others, power scavenging becomes a cultural tradition. It becomes a reliable way to access high-quality protein.
Right, the culture shifts.
Now, natural selection has a brand new selective pressure to work with. Within that hominin population, there is natural genetic variation. Some individuals simply happen to have slightly longer legs or slightly thicker tendons in their ankles.
Before power scavenging, those traits were just neutral.
Exactly. But now they are highly advantageous. The individuals with those traits are faster, more efficient runners. They get to the carcass first, they secure more high-density calories, they survive droughts better, and they successfully raise more offspring.
So over thousands of generations.
The culture of scavenging literally molds the biology, slowly stretching the legs, thickening the Achilles, and building the glutes until you arrive at the specialized runner, Homo ergaster. The cultural idea sculpted the flesh.
The idea came first, and the body followed. I find that incredibly compelling. But I also want to push back on this a bit, or at least expand the lens based on what Roberts was saying.
Yeah, go for it.
Because when we discuss early human innovation, power scavenging, hunting, tool making, we almost universally picture the exact same character in our minds.
The caveman.
Right. We envision a serious, intensely muscular, bearded caveman gripping a sharpened flint spear, staring intensely at a mammoth. Our entire view of the past is utterly obsessed with the spear and the hunter.
It is a profound, pervasive bias in paleoanthropology. For over a century, the field was completely dominated by the man-the-hunter paradigm.
Man the hunter.
Yeah, it assumes that male-driven violence, big game hunting, and weapon manufacturing were the primary, if not sole, drivers of human evolution.
And it ignores a glaring biological reality about human infants. You mentioned earlier how chimpanzee biology allows for infant independence.
Right, a chimpanzee baby has strong grasping reflexes, and the mother is covered in thick body hair. From a very young age, the baby can simply clamp onto the mother's fur and hang on securely while she climbs, forages, or moves on all fours.
So the mother is essentially unencumbered.
Completely hands-free.
Right. But human evolution completely broke that system. We became fully bipedal, requiring us to stand upright, which totally changes the mechanics of carrying anything. And simultaneously, we lost our thick body hair to aid in sweating and thermoregulation.
So a human infant has absolutely nothing to hold on to.
Nothing. And even if they did, their grasping reflexes aren't strong enough to support their own weight against gravity for long periods. Human babies are uniquely altricial, meaning they are born completely helpless and remain essentially dead weight for years.
They require constant physical carrying.
Exactly. If a bipedal mother has to use one or both of her arms to physically support a heavy infant all day, her ability to forage for food, process materials, or defend herself just plummets.
The metabolic cost of carrying a child in your arms while walking miles across the savannah is astronomical.
So doesn't that logically mean that the very first, absolute, most critical human invention couldn't have been a weapon to kill animals? It had to be a tool to carry infants.
It's a fantastic point.
Why are we so obsessed with the flint spear when a woven sling made of grass or animal hide might have been the actual technology that allowed our species to survive bipedalism? If you cannot efficiently carry your baby, your lineage dies out.
You are highlighting a massive structural blind spot in how we interpret the past. The baby sling hypothesis is incredibly strong from a biomechanical and evolutionary standpoint.
What?
But the problem is taphonomy,
Taphonomy.
the science of fossilization. Stone spears, flint hand axes, and butchered bones preserved perfectly in the dirt for millions of years. Organic materials like woven grasses, leather, or animal hide slings rot away in a matter of months.
Because we only find the stones, we center our entire narrative around the stones.
We mistake the surviving evidence for the entirety of the culture. And this bias was heavily reinforced by early paleo-art. Roberts actually calls out the most famous illustration of human evolution, the March of Progress.
Oh, everyone knows this image. It's the drawing of the knuckle-walking ape on the far left, slowly standing up straighter and straighter as it moves to the right, until it becomes a modern, handsome man holding a tool.
Drawn by Rudolf Zallinger in 1965. It is arguably the most recognizable scientific illustration in history, and it is entirely misleading.
On multiple levels.
First, it implies that evolution is a straight, teleological progression marching toward a perfected goal, which is modern man. We know that is false. Evolution is a messy, sprawling bush with many dead ends, like the hobbits.
Right.
Second, it implies we evolved directly from knuckle-walking apes, which actually remains a subject of intense debate. Our last common ancestor may have been a tree-dwelling ape that didn't knuckle-walk at all.
And third?
Third, and most destructively, it features exclusively adult men. It completely erases over half the population from the story of human origins.
It deletes women, and it deletes children entirely, and we are still perpetuating this today. If you prompt an AI image generator right now to show you early humans, it almost exclusively spits out hyper-realistic images of serious, muscular men holding spears, wearing furs, looking aggressively at the horizon.
It completely ignores the anthropological reality of modern hunter-gatherer societies, which are our best proxy for early human behavior.
Because in those societies, the men aren't bringing in all the food.
In the vast majority of these societies, it is the women, gathering tubers, nuts, fruits, and trapping small game, who reliably provide 60 to 70% of the daily caloric intake.
60 to 70%.
The big game hunting by men is highly prestigious, it gets all the glory, but it is often statistically unreliable. The quiet, consistent technology of gathering, woven baskets, digging sticks, infant slings is what actually keeps the group from starving to death.
It really changes how you look at every artifact we find in a museum. We bring this incredibly heavy, serious, male-centric bias into the museum with us. Take the Lion Man figurine, for example.
The Lowenmensch. It is a stunning artifact.
It really is. It is a nearly 40,000-year-old carving found in a cave in Germany, associated with the Aurignacian culture of early modern humans. It is carved from mammoth ivory and depicts a human body with the head of a cave lion.
It is incredibly intricate.
And the traditional archaeological interpretation is immediate heavy reverence. You read the museum placards and it says, this is a deity, this is evidence of complex shamanic rituals, this represents a profound spiritual awakening in early man.
Right, it has to be religion.
But what if it wasn't serious at all? What if a parent sitting by a fire 40,000 years ago, just spent hours carving mammoth ivory because their 5-year-old child was obsessed with the lions they heard roaring outside the cave. What if the Lion Man was just a prehistoric action figure?
It is a completely valid hypothesis that is almost always dismissed by academics. We constantly project our modern adult obsessions with utility, religion, and solemnity onto the past.
We forget they were just people.
We forget that these were human beings. We forget about play. We forget about boredom. We forget about parents trying to entertain their children during a long, freezing Ice Age winter.
Yeah.
By ignoring the social, cooperative, and playful elements of our history, by erasing the women and the children from the narrative, we fundamentally misunderstand who we are and exactly how we survived.
It requires a total reevaluation of the human character. We aren't just the smartest apes with the sharpest spears. We are the apes who carried our babies in slings, who carved toys for our kids, and who shared food with strangers when the weather turned cold.
That is the real story of humanity.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this deep dive. When you lay out all of this evidence, the fish skills in our throats, the viral code in our placentas, the fact that our brains aren't the only prerequisite for technology, and the reality that cooperation is what saved us, what does this mean for us today?
The realization is incredibly grounding. We aren't going to magically evolve out of our biology. We aren't going to sprout extra limbs or develop laser vision in the next 1,000 years.
Sadly, no.
Our fundamental body plan, a torso, 4 limbs, a forward-facing head with backward-wired eyes that was locked in 500 million years ago by a fish swimming in an ancient ocean. We are fundamentally, inescapably animals.
We are deeply physically entrenched in the natural web. We are not hovering above it like gods. And that is the core humanist moral imperative that emerges from this anatomical history.
Absolutely. If we recognize that we are not the engineered masters of a biological dominion, but merely a cooperative primate living in a highly fragile, interconnected biological web, it should instill a profound sense of humility.
But we don't act like that. We act as though our technology insulates us from nature. We build sprawling, climate-controlled cities, we synthesize our medicines, and we order food on apps, creating this illusion that we have fully transcended the food chain.
But the illusion is incredibly brittle.
If insect populations continue to collapse out there in the real world and we lose our primary pollinators, it isn't just a sad day for biodiversity, it's a direct threat to our caloric survival.
We lose our food supply.
The grocery store shelves go empty because the plants can't reproduce. It is a biological tragedy that will directly, physically end us because regardless of our smartphones and our spaceships, we are still just air-breathing, food-eating mammals.
We share their fate because we share their biology. The boundaries between us and the natural world are entirely constructed by our egos.
It is a heavy realization, but such an important one.
Definitely.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over. We spent a significant amount of time exploring how behavioral flexibility and cultural innovations, like running to scavenge meat or carrying materials across valleys, actually created selective pressures that drove our physical, biological evolution.
Right. Culture dictates the shape of the organism over deep time.
So if moving rocks and sharing information across a few ice age valleys forced our brains and our bodies to adapt to expansive cooperation, what is the internet doing to us right this very second?
That is a staggering question.
Because for the absolute first time in the 300,000-year history of Homo sapiens, our social network is not limited by geography at all. It covers the entire globe, and it operates instantaneously.
We are exposed to more information, more social interactions, and more cognitive stimuli in a single day than our ancestors experienced in an entire lifetime.
Exactly. As our culture completely relocates into a hyper-connected digital landscape, our next evolutionary leap almost certainly won't involve changing the shape of our leg bones. It might not leave any physical fossils at all.
No, it'll be internal.
Instead, we might currently be in the exact middle of a massive, invisible evolutionary event. The intense cultural pressure of the digital age might be fundamentally rewriting our cognitive wiring right now, selecting for traits that allow us to filter, process, and survive the overwhelming deluge of the information age.
We have created a completely unprecedented environment of our own making, and it is undoubtedly driving our evolution in ways we lack the perspective to fully see yet. The biological duct tape is still being applied as we speak.
Exactly. The renovation of the 500-year-old house is far from over. So the next time you hold up your hands to look at your fingers or you reach back to feel the nuchal ligament on the back of your neck, remember that you aren't looking at the end of the story. You are just looking at the latest messy, beautiful, cooperative draft. Thanks for diving deep with us.